I was standing in my driveway on a Tuesday morning in early March, coffee in one hand and my county-issued tablet in the other, when I saw her marching across my lawn like she owned the place. My name is Aaron Anderson, and I had just finished installing a beautiful new propane setup in my backyard the weekend before. It was pristine, perfectly to code, and honestly, a work of art if you appreciated proper gas line installations like I did. Being the county gas inspector for Riverside County, California, for the past 15 years, I knew exactly what I was doing. Every connection was torque tested, every line properly supported, and the whole system was about 3 times safer than code required. I took pride in my work, especially when it was my own home. The woman storming toward me was someone I recognized from the neighborhood meetings I usually avoided. Her name was Patricia something. She had that particular haircut that screamed, "I need to speak with your manager," and her expression suggested I was about to find out exactly what was bothering her. "Excuse me," she called out, still 10 feet away. "Are you the homeowner?" I took a sip of my coffee and nodded. "That would be me." "Morning." She stopped at the edge of my driveway, hands on her hips, and I could see she was holding a folder stuffed with papers. "I'm Patricia Donovan, president of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. I received several complaints about an unauthorized propane installation on your property." "Several complaints?" I raised an eyebrow. "I just installed it Saturday. It's Tuesday." "That's beside the point," Patricia said, her voice taking on that particular tone of manufactured authority. "Any external modifications to your property must be submitted to the HOA for approval at least 30 days in advance. You failed to do so. Additionally, propane tanks are only permitted to be stored in approved locations, which do not include the side yard." I set my coffee down on the hood of my truck. "The tank is in the backyard, not the side yard, and it's completely to code. The side of your backyard is visible from the street if you stand at the correct angle," Patricia said, as if this made perfect sense. "That constitutes a visible installation requiring pre-approval. Furthermore, I have serious concerns about the safety of your setup. It looks extremely dangerous." This was rich. I had inspected over 10,000 gas installations in my career, failed about a quarter of them, and written safety violation reports that had probably saved countless lives. My installation was textbook perfect because I literally helped write the textbook for gas inspectors in California. "I assure you it's completely safe," I said, keeping my voice level. "I know what I'm doing." Patricia's expression turned condescending. "I'm sure you think you do, but unless you're a licensed professional, you shouldn't be working with dangerous materials like propane. I'm going to have to insist you remove it immediately, or I'll be forced to take action." "What kind of action?" I asked, genuinely curious where this was heading. She pulled a paper from her folder and held it up like it was a court summons. "This is a formal violation notice from the HOA. You have 48 hours to remove the installation and restore your yard to its previous condition. If you fail to comply, you'll be fined $500 per day until the violation is corrected." I almost laughed. $500 per day. "The HOA bylaws are very clear on this matter," Patricia said, her chin lifting slightly. "Dangerous and unauthorized installations are subject to maximum penalties. If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." That got my attention, but not for the reason she probably thought. "The authorities. The police, code enforcement, county inspectors, whoever we need to call," Patricia said. "This is a serious safety violation, and I won't have you endangering this entire neighborhood because you decided to play handyman with explosive materials. Now, I was definitely interested in seeing how this would play out. "You're going to call the county gas inspector." "If that's what it takes," she said firmly. "Though I doubt we'll need to go that far. Most reasonable people comply once they understand the seriousness of the situation." I picked up my coffee again and took another sip, considering my options. I could tell her right now who I was and what I did for a living. That would probably end this conversation pretty quickly. But something about Patricia's attitude rubbed me the wrong way. She hadn't asked a single question about the installation, hadn't bothered to actually look at it, and was threatening me with fines and legal action without even trying to understand the situation. "You know what?" I said. "I'm not going to remove it. It's staying right where it is." Patricia's eyes widened slightly, like she wasn't used to people refusing her demands. "Excuse me. The installation is legal, it's safe, and it's staying," I said. "If you want to call whoever you need to call, go ahead." Her face flushed red. "You're making a very big mistake, Mr. Anderson. The HOA has significant authority to enforce our community standards, and we will use every tool at our disposal." "Looking forward to it," I said, giving her a friendly smile that clearly irritated her even more. Patricia turned on her heel and marched back across my lawn, leaving divots in the grass with her sensible heels. I watched her go, then pulled out my phone and texted my wife, Sarah, who was at work. "HOA lady just threatened to call the cops and the county on my propane setup. This is going to be entertaining." She texted back almost immediately. "Please don't antagonize the neighbors too much," I replied with a simple, "No promises." The rest of Tuesday passed without incident. I went to work, conducted my usual inspections around the county, failed 2 restaurant installations for improper ventilation, and approved a new residential setup in Morno Valley. It was a normal day, except I kept wondering when Patricia would make her move. Wednesday morning, I got my answer. I was in my home office, reviewing some paperwork before heading out for the day's inspections, when I heard voices in my driveway. I looked out the window and saw a Riverside Police Department cruiser parked on the street, along with Patricia's silver Mercedes SUV. 2 officers were standing in my driveway, and Patricia was gesturing animatedly toward my backyard. This was going to be good. I grabbed my county ID badge, clipped it to my belt, and walked outside. The officers turned as I approached, and I could see they were both young, probably relatively new to the force. Their name tags read Officer Martinez and Officer Chen. "Morning, officers," I said. "Something I can help you with?" Officer Martinez, the taller of the two, nodded. "Are you the homeowner, sir?" "I am. Aaron Anderson." Patricia jumped in before the officer could continue. "Officers, as I was explaining, this man has installed a dangerous propane system in his backyard without any permits or approvals. It's an extreme safety hazard, and he's refused to remove it despite being given notice by the HOA. Officer Chen pulled out a notepad. "Sir, did you install a propane system recently?" "I did," I confirmed. "Last Saturday." "It's a 500-gallon tank with a properly installed regulator. Copper lines run to my house for the generator backup system and the new pool heater I'm putting in." "You have permits for this installation?" Officer Martinez asked. This was the moment. I could see Patricia practically vibrating with vindication. "I don't need a permit for my own installation. I'm the county gas inspector." The 3 of them stared at me. Officer Chen spoke first. "You're what?" I unclipped my badge and held it up. "Aaron Anderson, Riverside County Gas Inspector. I've held this position for 15 years. The installation in my backyard is completely to code, probably exceeds code in most respects, and definitely doesn't require a permit for me to work on my own property." Officer Martinez leaned in to look at my badge, then nodded slowly. Okay, so you're qualified to do this kind of work. More than qualified, I said. I literally inspect these installations for a living. I probably review 50 to 75 propane setups a month across the county. Patricia's face had gone from red to pale. That doesn't change the fact that you didn't get HOA approval. You still violated the bylaws. Officer Chen turned to her. Madam, with all respect, HOA violations are a civil matter. If there's no criminal activity and no actual safety violation, there's not much we can do here. But he could be lying, Patricia protested. Just because he has a badge doesn't mean the installation is safe. Officer Martinez looked at me. Sir, would you mind if we took a look at the installation? Just to verify everything is in order. Not at all, I said. Follow me. We walked around to the backyard, Patricia following behind and muttering to herself. My propane setup was exactly as I'd left it. A white 500-gallon tank sitting on a proper concrete pad, positioned exactly the required distances from the property line and any structures. The copper lines were supported every 4 feet, the regulator was clearly labeled, and the emergency shut-off valve was easily accessible and marked with reflective tape. Officer Martinez whistled softly. That's a nice setup. Thank you, I said. The tank is anchored with 4 foundation bolts. The concrete pad is 6 inches thick with rebar reinforcement. And all the connections are tested to 150% of operating pressure. The lines are sleeved where they pass through the wall, and I've got a carbon monoxide detector in every room of the house, plus 2 propane detectors in the garage and utility room. Officer Chen was taking notes. This is better than some commercial installations I've seen. That's because most commercial installations are done by contractors trying to save money, I said. When it's your own house, you do it right. Patricia was looking increasingly desperate. But the HOA rules clearly state, Madam, Officer Martinez interrupted gently. The HOA rules don't override county building codes or safety regulations. If Mr. Anderson here is a certified county inspector and the installation meets code, there's no violation we can cite. Then I'll report him to his supervisors, Patricia said. There must be some kind of conflict of interest in him inspecting his own work. I couldn't help but smile at that. Go ahead. My supervisor is Dennis Fletcher, the county building and safety director. His number is on the county website. I'm sure he'll be happy to explain that county employees are allowed to maintain their own homes. Officer Chen closed his notepad. Mr. Anderson, everything here looks fine to me, but obviously we're not gas inspectors. Is there someone else at the county who could verify this meets code just to put everyone's mind at ease? Sure, I said. My colleague Jake Morrison could come by. He's been an inspector for about 8 years. I'll give him a call. Patricia looked like she was about to explode. This is ridiculous. He's going to call his friend to lie for him. Officer Martinez's patience was clearly wearing thin. Madam, we've done what we can here. There's no evidence of criminal activity, and Mr. Anderson has provided credentials showing he's qualified to do this work. If you want to pursue an HOA violation, that's between you and him, but it's a civil matter. I want you to make him remove it, Patricia demanded. We can't do that, Officer Chen said firmly. We don't have cause. The officers headed back around to the front, and I walked with them. Patricia trailed behind, talking rapidly into her cell phone. I caught fragments of her conversation. Absolutely incompetent. County corruption. Lawyer. At their cruiser, Officer Martinez turned to me. Sorry about the hassle, Mr. Anderson. You might want to document everything, just in case she tries to escalate through the HOA. I appreciate you coming out, I said. I know these calls can be a pain. Part of the job, Officer Chen said with a slight smile. Though I'll admit, this is the first time someone's called us to report a county inspector for doing inspector things. They drove off, and Patricia immediately zeroed in on me. This isn't over, not by a long shot. I figured, I said. Do what you need to do. She got in her Mercedes and peeled out, tires squeaking on the asphalt. I went back inside and called Jake Morrison. Hey Aaron, what's up? Jake answered on the second ring. You busy this afternoon? I asked. I need you to come by my place and verify my propane installation meets code. There was a pause. Your installation. What's going on? I explained the situation, including Patricia's threat to report me to our supervisors. Jake was laughing by the time I finished. She actually called the cops on a gas inspector for installing a propane tank. She did, I confirmed. And I have a feeling she's not going to let this go. Could you swing by around 4 just to document everything's up to code? Absolutely, Jake said. This I've got to see. Is the tank as over-engineered as your shed was? More so, I admitted. The shed incident was something of a legend at the county office. I'd built a storage shed in my backyard a few years ago that was technically rated to survive a Category 3 hurricane, despite Riverside being nowhere near the coast. I like to build things to last. Can't wait, Jake said. See you at 4. The rest of the day was busy. I had an inspection in Corona that took longer than expected when I found a restaurant trying to run a gas line through a wall cavity without any protection. That resulted in a failed inspection, a very angry restaurant owner, and a lot of paperwork. By the time I got home around 3:30, I was ready to relax. Instead, I found my driveway blocked by a white van with Channel 7 news printed on the side. You've got to be kidding me, I thought. A woman in a blue blazer with perfectly styled hair was standing on my lawn with a cameraman, and they were filming my house. I recognized her from the local news. Jennifer Pearson, one of those investigative reporters who loved finding small-time corruption stories. I parked on the street and walked up to them. Can I help you? Jennifer turned with a practiced smile. Are you Aaron Anderson? I am. Mr. Anderson, I'm Jennifer Pearson with Channel 7 News. We received a tip that you, a county gas inspector, installed a dangerous propane system at your home without proper permits or oversight. Would you care to comment? I looked directly at the camera. That's not accurate. The installation is completely to code and presents no safety hazard. As a county employee, I'm allowed to work on my own property without needing separate permits for work I'm qualified to perform. But shouldn't there be some independent verification? Jennifer pressed. Isn't it a conflict of interest for an inspector to inspect his own work? I'm not inspecting my own work, I said. There's no inspection because no inspection is required. However, a colleague of mine is coming by shortly to verify everything meets code if that satisfies your concern. Jennifer's eyes lit up at that. Would you be willing to let us film that verification? I considered it for a moment. This could backfire, but it could also shut this whole thing down. Sure, why not, but you'll need to stay on the driveway and out of the way. Excellent, Jennifer said. We'll wait. Jake showed up about 20 minutes later and his eyebrows went up when he saw the news van. I met him at his truck. This got complicated, I said. I can see that, Jake said, glancing at the camera. HOA lady called the news, apparently. I lowered my voice. Look, I know this is weird, but could you just do a standard inspection? By the book, everything documented. You nervous about something? Jake asked with a grin. No, but I want it clear that this was done right. We walked around to the backyard, with Jennifer and her cameraman following at a respectful distance. Jake pulled out his own tablet and began the inspection process. He checked the tank positioning, measured the distances to property lines and structures, tested the emergency shutoff valve, examined every connection, and even used a pressure gauge to verify the system was holding steady. It took about 30 minutes. When he was done, Jake turned to the camera with a professional expression. "This installation exceeds county code requirements in several respects," he said. "The tank positioning is correct, all connections are properly made and tested, the support structures are more than adequate, and the safety equipment is appropriate. I would pass this installation without reservation if it were a commercial site." "So there's no safety concern?" Jennifer asked. "None whatsoever," Jake confirmed. "This is about as good as residential propane installations get. Whoever did this work knew exactly what they were doing." "Because Mr. Anderson is a county gas inspector," Jennifer said. "That's right," Jake said. "And before you ask, yes, county employees can work on their own properties without permits for work they're qualified to perform. It's standard practice. A county electrician can wire his own house, a plumber can replace his own pipes, and a gas inspector can install his own propane system. As long as the work meets code, there's no issue." Jennifer looked a bit disappointed that there was no scandal to uncover. She thanked us for our time, and she and her cameraman packed up. As they were leaving, Patricia's Mercedes came speeding up the street and screeched to a stop behind the news van. Patricia jumped out, saw the news crew, and immediately launched into a prepared speech. "Thank you for coming. This is exactly the kind of corruption that needs to be exposed. County officials doing whatever they want without oversight or accountability." Jennifer looked at me, then at Patricia, and I could see her making a calculation. "Madam, we just had the installation inspected by another county gas inspector. It meets all safety codes and presents no hazard." Patricia's face fell. But that's just his friend covering for him, madam," Jake said, stepping forward. "I don't know if Aaron considers me a friend, but I take my job seriously. If this installation was dangerous or violated code, I would have failed it. I've failed his work before when we've been on joint inspections and I thought he missed something. The county doesn't play favorites with safety violations." "This is a cover-up," Patricia insisted, her voice getting shrill. "You're all corrupt." Jennifer's expression shifted from professional interest to annoyance. "Madam, are you the one who called us with this tip?" "I did, because someone needs to hold these people accountable," Patricia said. "He violated HOA rules, he's doing dangerous work, and everyone is just protecting him." "The work isn't dangerous," Jennifer said. "We just verified that, and HOA violations aren't really news unless there's an actual safety concern or criminal activity. Thank you for the tip, but I don't think we have a story here." The news van pulled away, leaving Patricia standing in the street looking lost. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Mrs. Donovan," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I understand you're concerned about neighborhood standards, but my propane installation isn't dangerous, isn't illegal, and isn't going anywhere. If you want to fine me through the HOA, that's your right, but I'm not removing it." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You'll regret this. The HOA has lawyers, we have resources, and we will make your life miserable until you comply with community standards." "Do what you need to do," I said. Patricia got back in her car and drove off. Jake stood next to me, shaking his head. "That woman is going to be a problem," he said. "Yeah," I agreed. "I'm getting that impression." Jake clapped me on the shoulder. "Good luck, man. Let me know if you need anything else documented. And seriously, nice work on that installation. The pressure test results were perfect." "Thanks for coming out," I said. That evening, my wife Sarah got home from her job at the hospital where she worked as a surgical nurse. She found me on the back patio, staring at my propane tank like it was going to explode. "That bad?" she asked, handing me a beer. "News crews, police, HOA president having a meltdown in the street," I said. "So yeah, kind of bad." Sarah sat down next to me. "You know, you could have just told her who you were from the beginning." "I know," I admitted. But she was so sure she was right, and she didn't ask a single question about the actual installation. She just saw something she didn't like and decided to use her authority to make me change it. "And now you're in a war with the HOA, Sarah said. "I don't think I started this war." "No, but you're definitely not backing down from it," she observed. "What happens if they do try to fine you?" "Then I'll fight the fine," I said. "HOA bylaws can't override county building codes. If they want to take me to court over it, we'll go to court." Sarah sighed. "This is going to be expensive, isn't it?" "Maybe," I said. "But it's the principle. I did everything right, everything legal, and everything safe. I'm not going to let someone bully me into tearing it out just because they don't like how it looks from a certain angle if you stand in exactly the right spot." She smiled despite herself. "You're stubborn, you know that. I've been told." The next morning, Thursday, I found a letter from the HOA in my mailbox. It was a formal notice of violation, complete with photos of my propane tank taken from various angles. The letter informed me that I was in violation of Section 7.3.4 of the HOA bylaws regarding unapproved external installations, and Section 12.1.2 regarding dangerous material storage. I was being fined $500 per day starting immediately, with the fines to continue until the violation was corrected. I took the letter to work and showed it to Dennis Fletcher, my supervisor and the county building and safety director. Dennis was in his early 60s, had been with the county for over 30 years, and had seen just about everything. He read the letter, then looked up at me over his reading glasses. "So you've managed to declare war on your HOA." "It wasn't intentional," I said. "Aaron, with you it never is," Dennis said, but he was smiling. "Okay, walk me through this. What exactly did you install?" I explained the entire setup, including the specifications, the safety features, and the fact that Jake had already verified everything was to code. Dennis listened carefully, occasionally asking technical questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "So you've got a perfect installation that exceeds code requirements, and the HOA is losing their minds because you didn't ask permission first." "That's about the size of it," I confirmed. "And this HOA president, Patricia, she called the cops and the news, and threatened to report me to you for corruption or conflict of interest or something," I added. Dennis laughed at that. "Well, for the record, there's no conflict of interest. You're allowed to work on your own property. If you'd done something that violated code, that would be different, but from what you're describing, this is textbook work." "That's what I figured, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something," I said. "You're not missing anything," Dennis assured me. "The HOA can fine you all they want for bylaw violations, but they can't force you to remove a legal, safe installation. Worst case, they take you to court, and a judge will probably tell them to pound sand." That's what I thought. Dennis handed the letter back. "Keep me posted on this. If Patricia does call here trying to stir up trouble, I'll handle it. And Aaron, maybe don't antagonize her too much. You're the second person to tell me that." "Then maybe you should listen," Dennis said with a grin. I went about my day, conducting inspections and trying not to think about Patricia and her HOA vendetta. But when I got home that evening, I found another surprise waiting for me. There was a truck parked in front of my house with Riverside County Code Enforcement printed on the side. A woman in a county uniform was taking photos of my house from the street, and Patricia was standing next to her, pointing at various things and talking rapidly. I parked in my driveway and walked over. The code enforcement officer turned as I approached, and I was relieved to see it was someone I knew, Linda Morrison, Jake's wife, who worked in the code enforcement division. "Hey, Aaron," Linda said, looking apologetic. "Sorry about this." "Let me guess," I said. "Complain about my propane installation." "Among other things," Linda said, glancing at Patricia. "I've got complaints about the propane tank, your fence height, the color of your garage door, and apparently some landscaping issues." Patricia jumped in. "He's been systematically violating community standards for months. The propane tank is just the most egregious example." I looked at Linda. "My fence is 6 feet tall, which is the maximum allowed by county code. My garage door is tan, same as it's been since I bought the house. And I have no idea what landscaping issues she's talking about, since I just had the yard professionally done last month." Linda was already nodding. "I've got the property records here. Everything you just said matches what I'm seeing." "Mr. Anderson, do you mind if I take a look at the propane installation?" "Not at all," I said. "Though I should mention Jake already inspected it yesterday. I think the report should be in the county system by now." Linda pulled out her tablet and checked. "Yeah, here it is." Jake filed a complete inspection report. Everything passed with notes that it exceeds code requirements. She looked at Patricia. "Madam, according to this report, there's no code violation here." "He's lying," Patricia said. "They're all covering for each other." Linda's expression hardened. "Madam, that's a serious accusation. Are you saying you have evidence that county employees are falsifying inspection reports?" Patricia seemed to realize she'd gone too far. I'm saying there's a clear conflict of interest. He can't be trusted to inspect his own work." "He didn't inspect his own work," Linda said patiently. "Another inspector verified the installation meets code. That's standard procedure when there are concerns. And I'm looking at photos from that inspection right now. This installation is better than 90% of what we see in the field." "But the HOA rules don't supersede county codes," Linda interrupted. "If Mr. Anderson violated your HOA bylaws by not getting pre-approval, that's between you and him. But from a county code enforcement perspective, there's no violation here." Patricia's face was turning red again. "So you're just going to ignore all these violations?" Linda looked at her tablet. "What violations? The fence is legal height, the garage door color isn't regulated by county code, and I don't see any landscaping issues." "Madam, if you have legitimate code concerns, I'm happy to investigate them, but I can't enforce HOA bylaws. That's not what code enforcement does." "This is unbelievable," Patricia said. "Everyone in this county is corrupt." Linda's professional demeanor slipped for just a second. "Madam, I've been a code enforcement officer for 12 years. I've cited county employees, city employees, and even a county supervisor for code violations. We don't play favorites. If there was a violation here, I would document it and issue a citation. There isn't." Patricia grabbed her phone and started taking photos of Linda's county truck, the badge number, everything. "I'm reporting all of this to the County Board of Supervisors, the district attorney, and anyone else who will listen. This is corruption at every level." She stormed off to her car and drove away, tires squealing. Linda looked at me and shook her head. "That woman is something else," she said. "She's dedicated, I'll give her that," I said. "Aaron, seriously though, watch yourself," Linda said, her voice lower. "She seems like the type who won't let this go, and people like that can make your life difficult even if they're wrong." "I know," I said, "but I'm not tearing out a perfectly good propane installation just because she doesn't like it." "I wouldn't either," Linda admitted. "Just be careful." That night, Sarah and I talked about getting a lawyer. We'd been in the house for 5 years and we'd never had problems with the HOA before. But Patricia seemed determined to make this her personal crusade, and I was starting to realize this could get expensive fast. Friday morning, I got a call from Dennis before I'd even left for work. "Aaron, we've got a situation," he said. Patricia Donovan filed a formal complaint with the Board of Supervisors alleging corruption in the Building and Safety Department. She's claiming we're protecting you from legitimate code violations. I sat down heavily at my kitchen table. "Are you serious?" "Very serious," Dennis said. "I've got a meeting with the board chair this afternoon to address it. I need you to send me every piece of documentation you have about your propane installation. Photos, specs, Jake's inspection report, everything." "I'll send it right now," I said. "And Aaron, you might want to talk to a lawyer. Not because I think you did anything wrong, but because this woman is escalating fast, and you need to protect yourself." I spent the morning compiling every document, photo, and specification related to my propane installation. By the time I was done, I had a file that was probably overkill, but I wanted to be thorough. I sent everything to Dennis, then made some calls to find a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. I ended up with an attorney named Michael Foster, who came highly recommended. I met with him Friday afternoon at his office in downtown Riverside. Michael was in his 40s, dressed in an expensive suit, and had the kind of confidence that comes from winning a lot of cases. He listened to my story without interrupting, took notes, and asked pointed questions about the HOA bylaws and the specific violations I was being cited for. "Okay," he said when I finished. "First thing, stop engaging with Patricia directly. All communication goes through me from now on. Second, we're going to formally respond to the HOA violation notice and dispute the fines. Third, we're going to prepare for the possibility that this goes to court." "You think it will?" I asked, "based on what you've told me?" "Yes," Michael said. "This Patricia person sounds like she's made this personal. People like that don't usually back down just because they're wrong. They double down." "What are my chances if we go to court?" Michael leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, very good. HOAs have broad authority to enforce their bylaws, but they can't enforce rules that conflict with state or county codes. Your installation meets all legal requirements. It's been verified by multiple county officials, and you're a qualified professional. A judge is going to have a hard time siding with the HOA on this." "What about the fines they're already trying to impose?" I asked. "We'll fight those too," Michael said. "First step is a formal response to the violation notice, which I'll draft today. Then we'll see how they respond. If they insist on the fines, we'll take it to arbitration or court, depending on what your HOA bylaws require." I left Michael's office feeling slightly better but also aware that this was going to cost money. Legal fees weren't cheap, and even if I won, I'd probably be out several $1,000s in attorney costs. The weekend was quiet, which should have been my first warning that something was brewing. Patricia didn't show up. There were no more calls from reporters, and no county officials appeared at my door. Sarah and I spent Saturday working in the yard and Sunday having a barbecue with some friends from work. My propane setup worked perfectly, powering the new generator I'd hooked up, and nobody got blown up or injured. Monday morning, I got to work early and found an email waiting for me from Dennis. The subject line was, "Board of Supervisors Meeting Update." I opened it with a sense of dread. "Aaron met with board chair Friday afternoon. Showed them all your documentation and Jake's inspection report. They agreed there's no evidence of corruption or any code violations on your part. However, Patricia has apparently started a petition in your neighborhood, and is gathering signatures to have you removed from your position as county gas inspector. She's alleging you're a danger to public safety. Board wants to meet with you Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock, just to get your side of the story on record. This is precautionary, not disciplinary. Don't worry, but do be prepared. Dennis, a petition. She was trying to get me fired over this. I forwarded the email to Michael Foster, then started preparing for the board meeting. I'd never had to defend my professional conduct before, and the thought that my job might be in jeopardy over a HOA dispute was infuriating. Tuesday was a long day. I had inspections scheduled all over the county, including a complex commercial installation in Temecula that took most of the afternoon. When I finally got home around 6, I found Sarah in the kitchen, reading something on her tablet with a concerned expression. "You need to see this," she said, turning the tablet toward me. It was a post on the Riverside Meadows community Facebook group. Patricia had written a long, detailed post about me, my propane installation, and what she called systemic corruption in the county government. She'd included photos of my house, my propane tank, and even a photo of me that looked like it had been taken when I wasn't looking. The post had over 100 comments, with people taking sides and arguing back and forth about whether I was a menace to the neighborhood or being unfairly targeted. "Is this even legal?" I asked. "Posting my photo and address like this?" "I don't know," Sarah said. "You should probably show your lawyer." I forwarded it to Michael, who called me back within an hour. "This is actually good for your case," Michael said. "How is this good?" I asked. "Because she's made this personal and public in a way that's going to hurt her credibility," Michael explained. "If this goes to court or arbitration, we can show that she's been on a campaign against you, not just enforcing HOA rules. That helps paint this as harassment rather than legitimate rule enforcement." "Okay," I said, not entirely convinced but trusting his judgment. "Also," Michael continued, "some of what she's posted might be considered defamation, especially the parts where she implies you're corrupt or dangerous. We might be able to file a countersuit if she keeps this up." That was an interesting thought. "Let's keep that in our back pocket." "Agreed," Michael said. "Focus on the board meeting tomorrow. Answer their questions honestly, show them your documentation, and remember that you haven't done anything wrong. They're not going to fire you over this." Wednesday morning came too quickly. I put on my best suit, gathered all my documentation, and drove to the county administration building in downtown Riverside. Dennis met me in the lobby, looking stressed. "There's a complication," he said immediately. "Of course there is," I said. "Patricia showed up with about 20 people from your neighborhood," Dennis explained. "They're all here to speak during the public comment period. The board chair tried to explain that your employment isn't up for public debate, but Patricia invoked some rule about community safety concerns." We walked into the board chambers, and sure enough, there was Patricia sitting in the front row with a group of neighbors I vaguely recognized. She saw me and whispered something to the people around her, and they all turned to look. The Board of Supervisors meeting was already in session. The 5 supervisors sat at a raised platform, and there was a small crowd of people waiting to speak on various agenda items. When we got to the agenda item about county employee conduct, the board chair, a woman named Supervisor Maria Santos, called me forward. "Mr. Anderson, thank you for coming," she said. "I want to be clear that this is not a disciplinary hearing. We've received some concerns from residents in your community, and we want to give you an opportunity to address those concerns on the record. Would you please state your name and position for the record?" I stepped up to the microphone. "Aaron Anderson. I'm a county gas inspector with the Building and Safety Department. I've held this position for 15 years. "Mr. Anderson, Can you explain the situation regarding the propane installation at your residence? Supervisor Santos asked. I went through the entire story, keeping it factual and professional. I explained the installation specs, the safety features, Jake's verification inspection, and Linda's code enforcement review. I showed photos and documentation on the screen behind me, including the inspection report that clearly showed everything was to code. When I finished, Supervisor Santos nodded. Thank you. I've reviewed all of this documentation and I don't see any evidence of wrongdoing on your part. However, I'd like to hear from the residents who are here today. I'm going to allow 5 minutes of public comment on this issue. Patricia was the first to the microphone. She'd prepared a whole speech, complete with printed materials that she distributed to the supervisors. Members of the board, I'm Patricia Donovan, president of the Riverside Meadows HOA. I'm here today to express serious concerns about Mr. Anderson's conduct and the county's handling of legitimate safety complaints. When Mr. Anderson installed a large propane tank without proper oversight or HOA approval, I did what any responsible community leader would do. I reported it to the police and to code enforcement. Instead of investigating my concerns, the county circled the wagons to protect one of their own. She went on like that for several minutes, painting a picture of widespread corruption and cover-ups. She claimed I was dangerous, that the county was negligent, and that the community lived in fear of an explosion. Other residents spoke too. Some supported Patricia, repeating concerns about safety. But others, to my surprise, spoke in my defense. One neighbor, an older man named Robert Chen who lived 2 houses down, stood up and gave a measured, thoughtful statement. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, he said. I've known Aaron Anderson for 5 years since he moved in. He's a good neighbor, quiet, keeps his property nice. I've seen the propane installation Patricia is complaining about. It's not visible from most angles, it's professionally done, and frankly, it looks safer than the old gas barbecue setup my neighbor has. This feels less like a safety concern and more like a personal vendetta. A woman named Susan Lai spoke next. I'm a civil engineer and I've worked with gas systems in my career. I've looked at Mr. Anderson's installation from the street, and it's obvious to anyone with technical knowledge that it was done correctly. The tank is properly positioned, the lines are supported, and the safety equipment is clearly visible. Patricia has been posting about this constantly on social media, spreading fear and misinformation. This isn't about safety, it's about control. When public comment ended, Supervisor Santos addressed the board. Based on the documentation we've received and the testimony we've heard today, I see no evidence that Mr. Anderson violated any county policies or engaged in any wrongdoing. The installation at his residence meets all code requirements and has been verified by multiple county officials. While I understand Ms. Donovan's concerns about HOA procedures, those are civil matters between the homeowner and the HOA. The county's responsibility is to ensure safety and code compliance, which has been clearly demonstrated here. Does anyone on the board have questions for Mr. Anderson? Supervisor David Kim, who represented the district I lived in, spoke up. Mr. Anderson, I appreciate you coming today and addressing these concerns. I've reviewed your employment record and you have an exemplary history with the county. I see no reason to question your professional conduct based on this matter. The other supervisors nodded in agreement. Supervisor Santos addressed Patricia directly. Ms. Donovan, I understand you're concerned about your community, but I want to be clear. The county does not play favorites when it comes to safety. If Mr. Anderson had violated any codes or engaged in any unsafe practices, we would take immediate action. regardless of his employment status. The fact that he's a county inspector doesn't give him special privileges, but it also doesn't disqualify him from working on his own property when he's qualified to do so. I consider this matter closed from the county's perspective. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but the board had already moved on to the next agenda item. She gathered her materials and left, followed by her supporters. I stayed for a few more minutes, thanking the supervisors for their time, then left with Dennis. "That went better than expected," Dennis said as we walked out. "Yeah," I agreed, "but something tells me Patricia isn't done yet." I was right. Thursday morning, I received a formal letter from Michael Foster. The HOA had responded to our dispute of the violation notice. They were not only maintaining the fines, they were increasing them to $1,000 per day and had scheduled a hearing with the HOA board for the following week. "This is their right under the bylaws," Michael explained when I called him. "They can hold a hearing before imposing fines. We'll attend, present your case, and see how the board rules. If they rule against you, we'll take it to arbitration." "How much are we talking in fines at this point?" I asked. "Well, it's been about 10 days since they first notified you," Michael calculated. "If they're claiming $500 per day for the first week, then $1,000 per day since their updated notice, we're looking at around $6,500 in claimed fines so far." I felt sick. "And if this drags on for months, it could get very expensive," Michael admitted. "But here's the thing. They can claim whatever fines they want, but they still have to enforce them. Usually that means putting a lien on your property, which requires a court order, and we can fight that. A judge is very unlikely to allow liens over a properly installed, code-compliant propane system, especially when the HOA's main complaint is that you didn't ask permission first." The HOA hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. Michael advised me to attend, but to let him do most of the talking. Sarah wanted to come for support, but I convinced her to stay home. No point in both of us sitting through what was likely to be an unpleasant evening. I spent the weekend trying not to think about it. My propane system continued working perfectly, powering my generator during a brief power outage on Saturday afternoon, and supplying the new pool heater I'd finally installed on Sunday. The system was efficient, safe, and exactly what I designed it to be. Tuesday evening arrived, and I met Michael at the community center. It was a nice facility, used for HOA meetings, neighborhood events, and community classes. About 40 people were already there when we arrived, which was apparently a record turnout for an HOA meeting. Patricia sat at the head table with 4 other HOA board members. I recognized 2 of them as neighbors I'd waved to occasionally, but I'd never really spoken with them. The other 2 were strangers. The meeting started with standard HOA business, budget reports, discussion of upcoming community events, and a debate about repainting the neighborhood entrance signs. Then Patricia called for the hearing regarding my violation. "We're here tonight to address a serious violation of community standards by resident Aaron Anderson," Patricia began, her voice formal. "Mr. Anderson installed a large propane tank on his property without seeking HOA approval as required by our bylaws. Despite repeated requests to remove this installation, he has refused. The board must now decide on appropriate enforcement measures." Michael stood up. "May I address the board?" One of the other board members, a man named Thomas Wells, nodded. "Please state your name and relationship to this case." "Michael Foster, attorney for Mr. Anderson. I'd like to present evidence that my client's installation complies with all applicable laws and codes, and that the HOA's violation notice is not enforceable." For the next 20 minutes, Michael systematically dismantled the HOA's case. He showed the inspection reports, explained the relevant county codes, and pointed out that the HOA bylaws explicitly stated that they couldn't prohibit installations that were legally required or permitted by county or state law. My client's propane system is a legal installation, Michael concluded. The HOA may require pre-approval for aesthetic modifications, but they cannot prohibit or penalize legal installations that meet safety codes. To attempt to do so would be an overreach of the HOA's authority. Patricia was ready with her counterargument. The bylaws clearly state that any external modification requires approval. Mr. Anderson never even attempted to seek that approval. The violation isn't the propane tank itself, it's his failure to follow proper procedures. Miss Donovan, Michael said calmly, if the HOA's position is that my client should have asked permission, then I'd like to know. Would you have granted that permission? Patricia hesitated. That would have depended on the details of his proposal and whether it met community standards. What specific community standards does the propane tank violate? Michael asked. It's visible from certain angles, Patricia said. It's unsightly. It lowers property values. Do you have any evidence that it lowers property values? Michael pressed. Any appraisals, comparative market analyses, or expert opinions? It's common sense, Patricia said. Large industrial equipment in residential yards affects home values. One of the other board members, a woman named Carol Johnson, spoke up. Patricia, I've actually been to look at the installation. Unless you're specifically looking for it, you can barely see it. It's painted white, it's behind his house, and it's well maintained. I don't think this is the eyesore you're making it out to be. Patricia looked betrayed. Carol, we discussed this. We agreed that homeowners need to follow the rules. I agree they need to follow rules, Carol said. But I'm not sure this rule applies here. If the county says it's legal and safe, what exactly are we prohibiting? Thomas Wells leaned forward. I think Carol raises a good point. What would we have done if Mr. Anderson had come to us asking for approval? We would have required him to position the tank somewhere less visible, Patricia said immediately, or to build a screening fence around it, or to choose a smaller tank that could be hidden better. But those requirements might have made the installation less safe or harder to access, Thomas pointed out. I'm not comfortable with the HOA telling people to work around safety codes for aesthetic reasons. The third board member, a younger man named David Park, spoke for the first time. I've read through our bylaws pretty carefully for this meeting. Section 4.7 says the HOA can't prohibit modifications required by law or necessary for the safe operation of a residence. Doesn't a propane system for heating and generators fall under that? Patricia's face was getting red. The point is he didn't ask. He just did whatever he wanted without any consideration for the community. Miss Donovan, Michael interjected. My client is a county gas inspector who has worked on thousands of similar installations. He knew his installation was legal and safe. He had no reason to believe the HOA could prohibit it. That's exactly the kind of arrogance I'm talking about. Patricia said, her voice rising. He thinks he's above the rules because of his job. Actually, I said, speaking up for the first time, I didn't think I was above the rules. I thought the rules didn't apply to code-required safety installations. If I was wrong about that, I apologize for not seeking pre-approval. But I'm not removing a legal, safe installation, and I'm not paying fines for following county codes. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Carol spoke again. I move that we dismiss the violation and rescind the fines. Mr. Anderson's installation is legal, it's safe, and while he probably should have checked with us first, I don't think we can or should prohibit it. Second, said Thomas immediately. Patricia looked around the table in disbelief. You can't be serious. We'll look weak if we back down now. We'll look reasonable, Carol corrected. Patricia, I understand you're passionate about maintaining community standards, but this isn't the hill to die on. If we push this and lose in court, it'll cost the HOA thousands in legal fees and make us look petty. David nodded. I agree with Carol. Let's vote and move on. Patricia called for the vote with obvious reluctance. Carol, Thomas, and David all voted to dismiss the violation and rescind the fines. Patricia voted against, and the fifth board member, who hadn't spoken at all, abstained. The motion passed 3-1 with one abstention. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. This is a mistake. You're setting a precedent that homeowners can do whatever they want as long as they claim it's legal. No, Thomas said firmly. We're setting a precedent that the HOA won't waste time and money fighting battles we can't win. There's a difference. The meeting moved on to other business, but Patricia seemed checked out, barely participating in the rest of the discussions. When the meeting ended, several neighbors came up to me to express their support. Robert Chen, who'd spoken at the Board of Supervisors meeting, shook my hand. Common sense prevailed, he said. Though I'm surprised Patricia backed down. I don't think she backed down so much as got outvoted, I said. Either way, good outcome, Robert said. Michael and I walked out to the parking lot together. That went about as well as it could have, he said. The violation is dismissed, the fines are gone, and you're in the clear. So this is over, I asked, hardly daring to believe it. Probably, Michael said. Though keep an eye out for Patricia. People like her sometimes have a hard time letting go. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in days. Sarah was waiting up, and I told her about the board vote and the dismissal of the fines. Thank God, she said. Maybe now we can get back to normal life. For about a week, it seemed like we would. The neighborhood was quiet. Patricia didn't make any appearances at my house, and I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd stopped posting about me on social media. But the following Monday, I got a call from Dennis that changed everything. Aaron, we have a serious problem, Dennis said, and the tone of his voice made my stomach drop. Patricia Donovan filed a formal complaint with the state licensing board claiming you falsified inspection reports. What? I couldn't process what I was hearing. What reports? She submitted what appears to be an inspection report with your name and signature on it, claiming you approved a restaurant gas installation in Corona that later had a gas leak and explosion, Dennis explained. She's alleging you're negligent and possibly corrupt. Dennis, I inspect probably 5 restaurants a month. Which one is she talking about? Place called the Riverside Grill in Corona, Dennis said. According to her complaint, you approved their gas installation 3 months ago, and they had a gas leak last week that caused a small explosion and fire. I pulled up my inspection records on my computer. The Riverside Grill. Yeah, I remember that one. I failed that inspection twice. The contractor kept running lines through unsupported wall cavities, and the connections were all wrong. I finally passed it on the 3rd inspection after they brought in a different contractor who did it right. Do you have documentation of all that? Dennis asked. Of course, I said. Every inspection is photographed and documented. The first 2 failure reports should be in the system. Send them to me right now, Dennis said. And Aaron, this is serious. If the state licensing board investigates and finds any evidence that you falsified reports, you could lose your license. I spent the rest of the day compiling every document related to the Riverside Grill inspection. I had photos from all 3 inspections, detailed notes on what needed to be corrected, and communications with both contractors. The final approval was completely justified because the installation had been corrected and met all code requirements. But when I looked up recent news about the Riverside Grill, I found the story Patricia was referring to. There had been a small explosion and fire at the restaurant the previous week. The news report said the fire department was investigating, and early indications suggested a gas leak. I called the restaurant directly and asked to speak with the owner, a man named David Cho. He was understandably stressed when I explained who I was and why I was calling. "Mr. Anderson, I remember you," he said. "You were the inspector who failed us twice before we finally passed." "That's right," I said. "Can you tell me what happened with the fire?" David sighed. "It's embarrassing, honestly. We had a leak in one of the lines, but it wasn't anything to do with the installation you inspected. One of my kitchen staff hit the line with a heavy pot about a month ago. It must have damaged the connection, and it started leaking slowly. Last week, the gas built up and ignited when someone turned on a burner." "So the leak wasn't related to the original installation?" I asked, relief flooding through me. "No, definitely not," David confirmed. "The fire investigator was very clear about that. It was accidental damage, not a fault with the installation." "Why are you asking?" I explained about Patricia's complaint to the state licensing board. David was immediately sympathetic. "That's ridiculous," he said. "The installation you approved was fine. This was entirely our fault for not noticing the damage earlier. I'll be happy to provide a statement to that effect if you need it." "That would be incredibly helpful," I said. "Thank you." I sent everything to Dennis, along with David Cho's contact information. Dennis forwarded it all to the state licensing board with a cover letter explaining the situation. "This should clear things up," Dennis said when we talked later that day. "The board will investigate. They'll see that you did your job correctly, and they'll dismiss the complaint." "What happens to Patricia?" I asked. "She filed a false complaint." "That's a good question," Dennis said. "If the board determines she knowingly made false accusations, they could refer it for criminal charges. Filing a false report with a state licensing board is a misdemeanor, possibly more serious depending on her intent." I thought about that. Part of me wanted Patricia to face consequences for what she'd put me through. But another part just wanted this whole thing to be over. The state licensing board moved faster than I expected. Within a week, an investigator named Richard Torres contacted me to schedule an interview. We met at a coffee shop in Riverside, and I walked him through everything: the original inspections, the documentation, and the fire at the Riverside Grill. Richard listened carefully, took notes, and asked good questions. "Mr. Anderson, do you know why Miss Donovan would file a complaint like this?" I explained the entire HOA situation, from the propane tank to the board hearing to the dismissal of the violations. Richard's expression grew increasingly incredulous as I talked. "So she filed a formal complaint with a state licensing board because she was upset about losing an HOA dispute?" Richard asked. "That's what it looks like to me," I said. "Did she have any reason to believe her allegations were true?" Richard asked. "Any information about the restaurant fire that suggested your inspection was at fault?" "I don't see how she could have," I said. "The fire investigation report clearly stated the leak was from accidental damage. That information was public. If she'd actually researched her complaint instead of just trying to attack me, she would have known that." Richard closed his notebook. "Mr. Anderson, based on what I've seen, this complaint appears to be completely without merit. I'll be recommending the board dismiss it immediately. I'll also be recommending they refer this matter to the district attorney for possible prosecution." That caught me off guard. Prosecution? Filing a false complaint with a state licensing board is a crime, Richard explained. It wastes state resources, damages reputations, and undermines the integrity of the licensing system. When people do it maliciously, as this appears to be, we take it seriously. I left the meeting feeling vindicated but also somewhat uneasy. I hadn't wanted to get Patricia arrested. I just wanted her to leave me alone. But apparently, Patricia had other plans. 2 days after my meeting with the licensing board investigator, I came home to find my propane tank had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "Danger" and "Illegal" in bright red letters across the white tank. They'd also tried to tamper with the main shut-off valve, though thankfully they hadn't succeeded in actually damaging anything. I called the police immediately. The responding officers were the same two who'd come out for Patricia's original complaint, Officers Martinez and Chen. "Mr. Anderson," Officer Martinez said, looking at the vandalized tank. "Any idea who might have done this?" "I have a pretty good idea," I said, and I explained about Patricia's escalating campaign against me. Officer Chen took photos of the damage. "Has anyone else had issues with her?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but she's pretty active on the neighborhood social media and she's definitely not happy about losing the HOA hearing." "We'll file a report," Officer Martinez said. "Do you have security cameras?" I didn't, which I was now regretting. "No, but I'll install some today." "Good idea," Officer Martinez said. "And Mr. Anderson, if you see anyone messing with your property, don't confront them. Call us immediately." After the police left, I went to the hardware store and bought 3 security cameras with motion detection and night vision. I spent the rest of the evening installing them, positioning them to cover my backyard, driveway, and front door. Sarah was upset when she saw the vandalism. "This has gone too far. That woman is unhinged." "The police are investigating," I said. "If it was Patricia, they'll figure it out." "And if it wasn't her directly, what if she convinced someone else to do it?" Sarah asked. That was a good point. Patricia had followers in the neighborhood, people who'd come to the board meeting and the supervisor's meeting to support her complaints. Any of them could have done this. The cameras were worth the investment. 3 nights later, at around 2 in the morning, motion detection alerts woke me up. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed just in time to see a figure in dark clothing approaching my propane tank with what looked like a tool in their hand. I called 911 while watching the feed. "Someone's tampering with my propane tank right now. I've got them on camera." The dispatcher kept me on the line while sending units. "Sir, stay inside your house. Do not confront them." "I'm not going anywhere," I assured her, watching the figure work on something near the tank. They seemed to be trying to loosen one of the connections. Police sirens cut through the night about 5 minutes later, and the figure ran. But they didn't get far. The cameras caught everything. The figure jumping my back fence, running through my neighbor's yard, and being tackled by Officer Martinez in the street, 2 houses down. I went outside as the officers were putting the person in handcuffs. When they stood up and the hood came off, I was genuinely surprised. It wasn't Patricia. It was a young man I didn't recognize, probably early 20s, wearing all black and carrying a wrench. Officer Chen came over to me. "Mr. Anderson, can you identify this person?" "Never seen him before," I said. The young man was read his rights and put in the back of a patrol car. Officer Martinez approached me with a grim expression. "Mr. Anderson, this gentleman has admitted that Patricia Donovan paid him to damage your propane tank. He was supposed to loosen the connections enough to cause a leak." I felt cold. "She paid someone to create a gas leak at my house." "That's what he says," Officer Martinez confirmed. "He's claiming she told him it was a prank, that you'd find it funny." But attempting to cause a gas leak is no prank. It's reckless endangerment at minimum. potentially attempted arson or worse depending on intent. Officer Chen was on the phone, presumably with a supervisor. When she hung up, she looked at Officer Martinez. "Detective Santos is on his way. He wants to talk to Mr. Anderson and get the full story before we approach Patricia Donovan." Detective Frank Santos arrived about 30 minutes later. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a tired expression that suggested he'd seen every variety of human stupidity. We sat in my living room, and I walked him through the entire saga from beginning to end. "So let me get this straight," Detective Santos said when I finished. "You installed a legal propane tank. She called the cops, called code enforcement, called the news, filed complaints with the county board and the state licensing board, and when all of that didn't work, she paid someone to vandalize your tank and potentially cause a gas leak." "That's the summary," I said. "And you're a county gas inspector, so you know exactly how dangerous a gas leak could be," Detective Santos continued. "I've investigated accidents caused by gas leaks," I said. "They can be deadly. An explosion in an occupied home, people die." Detective Santos closed his notebook. "Okay, we're going to go have a conversation with Miss Donovan. I'll need you to forward all your security camera footage to me. This is probably going to result in some serious charges." Sarah had been sitting quietly next to me the whole time. Now she spoke up. "What kind of charges?" "Reckless endangerment at minimum," Detective Santos said. "Conspiracy to commit vandalism, possibly attempted arson, though that would be up to the DA. If she told this kid to create a gas leak knowing that could cause an explosion, and if we can prove she intended to harm you or your property, we're talking felony charges." After Detective Santos left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a while. The sun was starting to come up, turning the sky gray outside our windows. "I just wanted to install a propane tank," I said finally. "I know," Sarah said, taking my hand. "This is insane." We found out later that morning what happened with Patricia. Detective Santos and 2 other officers went to her house around 6 a.m. According to the neighborhood rumor mill, Patricia initially denied everything, then claimed the young man was lying, then finally broke down and admitted she'd hired him, but insisted it was only meant to be minor vandalism, not dangerous. The young man, whose name was Tyler Reid, told a different story. He said Patricia had specifically instructed him to loosen the gas connections enough to cause a leak. She told him that I would be at work during the day, and the leak would be discovered before anyone got hurt, but it would scare me into removing the tank. Tyler claimed he didn't realize how dangerous this actually was until he was arrested. Patricia was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit reckless endangerment, solicitation of vandalism, and making false statements to a state agency regarding her licensing board complaint. Bail was set at $50,000. She posted it the same day, but the damage to her reputation was done. By afternoon, the story was all over local news. Jennifer Pearson from Channel 7 ran a story titled "HOA President Arrested for Allegedly Hiring Man to Sabotage Gas Inspector's Home." The story included interviews with me, statements from the police, and even featured footage from my security cameras showing Tyler Reid approaching my propane tank. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Carol Johnson, the HOA board member who'd voted in my favor, posted a statement announcing that Patricia had been removed from her position as HOA president effective immediately. Several neighbors apologized to me for supporting Patricia's complaints. A few still insisted I should have removed the tank to avoid all this drama, which I found darkly funny. The next week was a blur of activity. I gave statements to the police, met with the district attorney's office, and talked to reporters who wanted to know more about the story. The district attorney, a serious woman named Lisa Chen, told me they were pursuing the charges aggressively. "We take threats to public safety very seriously," DA Chen explained. "Gas leaks aren't pranks. They're deadly serious, and Miss Donovan should have known that." The fact that she targeted a gas inspector, someone who would absolutely understand the danger, makes this even worse. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. She'd plead guilty to misdemeanor charges in exchange for probation and no jail time. But DA Chen wasn't interested. She filed false reports with a state licensing board, paid someone to create a potentially deadly hazard, and did it all because she didn't like losing an HOA dispute, DA Chen said. "That's not someone who deserves a slap on the wrist." The preliminary hearing was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, Patricia had been ordered to stay at least 500 feet from my property and have no contact with me. The HOA elected Carol Johnson as the new president, and one of her first acts was to formally apologize to me on behalf of the association. "What Patricia did doesn't represent our community," Carol told me when she stopped by my house. "Most of us just want to live peacefully and maintain our property values. We're not interested in waging war over propane tanks." "I appreciate that," I said. Life slowly returned to normal. My propane system continued working perfectly. I cleaned off the spray paint, and the county sent an inspector, not Jake this time, to avoid any appearance of favoritism, who confirmed there was no damage to the tank or connections. My installation was still perfect. The neighborhood got used to seeing the security cameras on my house. A few other homeowners actually asked me for recommendations and installed their own systems. Robert Chen joked that Patricia had single-handedly boosted the home security industry in Riverside Meadows. 3 months later, I sat in a courtroom for Patricia's preliminary hearing. Sarah was with me, along with Dennis Fletcher and several other county employees who'd offered support. The courtroom was about half full, with reporters taking notes and curious neighbors filling the public gallery. Patricia looked diminished somehow, smaller than she had during all our confrontations. She sat at the defense table with her lawyer, a young public defender who looked overwhelmed. The prosecution presented their case methodically. They called Officer Martinez to testify about the initial vandalism. They called Officer Chen to testify about Tyler Reed's arrest and confession. They called Tyler himself, who testified about Patricia hiring him and giving specific instructions to loosen gas connections. When Tyler was asked why he'd agreed to do it, he gave a surprisingly honest answer. "She said this guy was a menace to the neighborhood, that he'd installed dangerous equipment, and that the cops weren't doing anything about it. She made it sound like she was protecting people. Plus, she offered me $500 and I needed the money." "Did she tell you he was a professional gas inspector?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Tyler said. "She said he was some guy who didn't know what he was doing. If you'd known he was a professional inspector, would you have done it?" Tyler shook his head. "No way. I'm not smart about a lot of things, but I know you don't mess with gas lines. That's how people die." The defense didn't have much to offer. Patricia took the stand and tried to explain that she'd been trying to protect the neighborhood, that she'd never intended for anyone to get hurt, that it had all gotten out of hand. But under cross-examination, the prosecutor made her look vindictive and obsessed. "Miss Donovan, when the HOA board voted to dismiss the violation against Mr. Anderson, did you accept that decision?" "I thought it was a mistake," Patricia said. "Did you accept it?" the prosecutor pressed. "No," Patricia admitted. "When the County Board of Supervisors reviewed the matter and found no wrongdoing, did you accept that? They were protecting their own." When the state licensing board investigated your complaint and found it was without merit, did you accept that? I still had concerns, Patricia said weakly. So even when every authority told you that Mr. Anderson had done nothing wrong, you continued to pursue him. Is that correct? Patricia didn't answer. The judge, a stern older man named Judge Richard Thompson, didn't take long to make his ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to bind Miss Donovan over for trial on all charges. Bail will continue at $50,000, and the restraining order remains in effect. The trial was scheduled for 2 months later. Patricia's lawyer tried once more to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office held firm. This was going to trial. The trial itself was relatively quick, just 3 days. The prosecution presented essentially the same case as the preliminary hearing, with additional testimony from the fire inspector, who'd investigated the Riverside Grill fire, and confirmed that Patricia's licensing board complaint was knowingly false. I testified about the installation, about Patricia's escalating behavior, and about the potential danger of tampering with gas connections. The defense tried to paint me as oversensitive, as someone who'd blown a neighborhood dispute out of proportion. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for about 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Patricia showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but I saw her shoulders slump slightly. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Thompson had clearly given the matter serious thought. "Miss Donovan," he began, "you held a position of trust in your community as HOA president. You abused that position to pursue a personal vendetta against a neighbor who had done nothing wrong. When legal means didn't give you the result you wanted, you resorted to illegal actions that could have resulted in serious injury or death. You filed false reports with state agencies, wasting public resources and damaging a professional's reputation. These are not minor offenses." He sentenced Patricia to 18 months in county jail, with credit for time served, followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the county for the cost of the various investigations, to me for my legal fees and the cost of cleaning and repairing my propane tank, and to Tyler Reed's Public Defender Fund as a deterrent against using desperate people to commit crimes. The total came to just over $45,000. Patricia's face was blank as the sentence was read. She was taken into custody immediately to begin serving her sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around me asking for statements. I kept it simple. "I'm glad this is over," I said. "All I ever wanted was to install a legal, safe propane system at my home. I'm sorry it escalated to this point, but I hope it sends a message that HOAs need to be reasonable and that pursuing personal vendettas has consequences." Jennifer Pearson from Channel 7 was there. "Mr. Anderson, do you feel vindicated?" I thought about that. "I don't feel vindicated. I feel tired. This whole thing was unnecessary. If Patricia had just accepted that my installation was legal and moved on, none of this would have happened. Instead, people's time was wasted, money was spent, and now she's going to jail. There are no winners here." The story ran on the evening news and spread across social media. It became a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the dangers of letting disputes escalate. Several state legislators even used it as an example when proposing reforms to HOA regulations. Life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Carol Johnson proved to be an excellent HOA president, focused on actual community concerns rather than personal crusades. The neighborhood entrance signs got repainted, the community center got a new roof, and nobody bothered me about my propane tank. Robert Chen invited Sarah and me over for dinner a few months after the trial ended. Over wine and grilled steaks, cooked on a propane grill, ironically, we talked about the whole experience. "You know what the craziest part is?" Robert said. "Patricia actually had some good ideas for the neighborhood. The entrance sign thing, organizing community events, improving the common areas. She could have been remembered as a good HOA president. Instead, she'll always be the woman who went to jail over a propane tank. Pride," his wife May said. "She couldn't stand being told she was wrong." I thought about that. Pride and an inability to admit mistakes. That combination had cost Patricia 18 months of her life, tens of thousands of dollars, and her reputation. All because she couldn't accept that sometimes homeowners get to do things HOAs don't like, as long as those things are legal. My propane system is still working perfectly. It powers my generator during outages, heats my pool, and runs the backup heating system I installed for winter. It's efficient, safe, and exactly what I designed it to be. Every time I see it, I think about how a simple home improvement project turned into a criminal case. I also think about the lessons learned. I learned that being right isn't always enough, that some people will escalate conflicts beyond all reason, and that documentation is everything. Those security cameras saved me from potentially serious problems. But mostly, I learned that sometimes the best response to unreasonable people is simply to stand firm and let the system work. I didn't retaliate against Patricia. I didn't harass her or escalate in response to her escalations. I just maintained that I was right, provided evidence, and let the police, the courts, and the licensing boards do their jobs. It worked out in the end, but it took months of stress, legal fees, and uncertainty. Would I do it all again? I'd like to say I'd just remove the tank and avoid the hassle. But honestly, the principle still matters to me. I did nothing wrong, and I shouldn't have to change my legal activities because someone else doesn't like them. The HOA has a new policy now, something Carol pushed through after Patricia's trial. Before pursuing violations, the board has to verify that the alleged violation actually conflicts with applicable laws and codes. They also have to attempt mediation before imposing fines. It's a small change, but it might prevent future situations like mine. Tyler Reed got probation for his role in the vandalism. The judge recognized that he'd been manipulated by Patricia and wasn't the real architect of the scheme. He's apparently working a regular job now and staying out of trouble. And Patricia? I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she served 13 months of her 18-month sentence before being released on good behavior. She moved to a different city after her release. I don't know if she learned anything from the experience, but I hope she did. As for me, I'm still a county gas inspector. I still take pride in my work, and I still believe that safety codes exist for good reasons. My supervisor Dennis jokes that I'm the only inspector he knows who's been to trial over personal home improvement, and he's probably right. The story has become something of a legend in the county building and safety department. New inspectors are told about the gas inspector, whose HOA tried to have him arrested for doing his job too well. It's usually presented as a cautionary tale about documentation and standing up for proper code enforcement. But for me, it's just a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing is complicated, expensive, and exhausting. And sometimes the people who are supposed to maintain community standards end up being the biggest threats to community peace. My propane tank is still there, still working perfectly, still completely legal. Every time I see it, I remember that sometimes the most important thing isn't winning or being proven right. It's simply refusing to be bullied into doing something you know is wrong, and that's the real end of the story. Not with triumph or vindication, but with a quiet satisfaction that principles still matter, that systems still work when you trust them, and that standing firm against unreasonable demands is sometimes the only reasonable thing to do. The propane tank is staying. And life goes on in Riverside Meadows, a little quieter now, a little more reasonable, and hopefully a little wiser about the difference between enforcing community standards and waging personal wars.